Hello and welcome to GameSack. A lot of you have been asking for an Xbox 360 episode, and well, here we are. I have to admit, I had a lot more fun making this one than I thought I would. It's also my first episode, and so far only episode, in 5.1 surround sound. So that means if you're watching via the YouTube app, like on a Roku or a Fire Stick or something on a surround sound system, you'll not only get the center channel, you'll also get left, right, left surround, right surround, and I might as well rumble the subwoofer real quick. If you didn't hear anything when I rumbled the subwoofer, don't worry. It just means you're missing out on something really, really cool. Anyway, let's take a quick look at the Xbox 360 console itself.
The Microsoft Xbox 360.
Released in November of 2005 at a price of $400, the Xbox 360 was the follow-up to the original Xbox. Unlike that console, the Xbox 360 was originally offered both with and without a hard drive. Once again, the media was DVD. The controller is similar to the Xbox Controller S from the previous generation and came in wired and wireless versions. The original Xbox 360 was a lemon, meaning it had a huge failure rate, indicated by the dreaded red ring of death. Strangely, my own console never fell victim to this. The Xbox 360 is powered by a 3-core 64-bit PowerPC CPU running at 3.2 GHz. It has 512 megabytes of RAM and a 500 MHz GPU. The first Xbox 360s did not offer HDMI video output, but it began appearing on consoles with the Zephyr motherboard in 2007 and also the Xbox 360S in 2010. A third version of the console was released called the E in 2013. The Xbox 360 came in third behind the PlayStation 3 and the Nintendo Wii in overall sales, but still sold a respectable 84 million units with over 2,100 physical and digital games released. I always thought it was funny that they called it the Xbox 360. I mean, why not the Xbox 2? Well, because Sony had the PlayStation 3. That's right, and Microsoft felt that if they called it the Xbox 2, people would think it was less cool than the PlayStation 3. So they had to get the number 3 in there somewhere so people would know that it was in the same generation as the PlayStation 3. In their defense, Microsoft was probably right that people would be that stupid. Anyway, I've chosen 23 games to talk about in this episode, so let's just get right into it. Here's Gears of War from Epic Games and Microsoft. It came out in 2006. I figured I'd mention this one because it was a really big deal when it initially came out. It's a rather gritty third-person shooter that relies extensively on a cover system. We hadn't seen a whole lot like this when it was new, so it was intense. Coming back to it today though, yikes. I mean, it plays okay, but man is it choppy. But come on, we didn't know any better back in 2006. You move with the left stick and aim with the right stick, and even back then I felt that the aiming was a little bit too floaty for its own good. Turning down the aim sensitivity and turning off the vibration seems to help a bit, but it's still not as good as later games would be. Besides the choppiness, this game helped set new trends in video game visuals, that trend being a lack of color. Besides that, there's really not much special about the visuals. The sound, however, is excellent. All the channels are active if you play in surround sound. I remember one part where you need to be really quiet because a giant monster was behind you and you could hear it in the surround speakers. You had to be really quiet or it'd come and get you. I wish I was able to make it there when I was capturing footage today. Anyway, this game is good, but it gets super repetitive quite fast, so I never bothered with the sequels. This one was remade on the Xbox One, and that version looks and performs much better.
Someone get on that Troika!
This is Ridge Racer 6 from Namco. For a while, it was common that when a new console launched, a Ridge Racer game was one of the first games. Ridge Racer 6 here is no different. You race several exotic but fictional cars around a bunch of different tracks. Be sure to drift around the corners because that'll earn you nitro, which you can use to boost your speed for a bit. It's arcadey fun and a good game to be sure, though I still prefer Ridge Racer 5 on the PlayStation 2. Also, the PlayStation 3 version of this game, which is called Ridge Racer 7, would offer up 1080p native resolution, while this one is at 720p. Still, this is a great game in its own right for its time.
Mattress on standby! Yes! I'm glad this is just a game! Holy!
I always liked Test Drive Unlimited from Atari. This is an open world game where you drive around Hawaii. I know what you're thinking, and that's probably, oh, gross. Yeah, it looks pretty bad, and honestly, even back when it was brand new, it didn't exactly impress in the visuals department. But still, I put so many damn hours in this game. So many that I'm somehow in this game. And I'm all pissed off looking. I mean, I am in the process of getting a very expensive ticket, so can you blame me? Anyway, you can just drive around freely if you want, but there are also a ton of races and other events you can do which are tied to the kind of car you have. My favorite is picking up the hitchhiker women who would rather be stranded than be seen in your crappy car.
Sorry, but I wouldn't want to be seen in that kind of car.
Or maybe they just don't want to be seen with me? But hey, I was actually able to find one that wanted to ride with me. Hell yeah, I'm getting some tonight! It looks ugly as sin, but it's still a really fun game.
Dispatch 11 to all Adam units. Be on the lookout for a Lamborghini. Driver has priors for traffic offenses.
There's also Ridge Racer Unbounded. This is Ridge Racer in name only, and it was externally developed by Bugbear. This one tries to be like a ghetto Burnout or something, only less cool. You drift with the press of the B button, which is super weird. I often found it easy to overdrift and ended up facing the wrong way. Fortunately, since this is not a real Ridge Racer game, you don't need to worry about drifting as much here. You also have a power button which will let you smash through things and find shortcuts or simply just to blow stuff up. I like the destructible environments, and the visuals can be pretty nice too. The music kinda sucks though, and the subwoofer channel is too loud and it doesn't really have high quality sounds in it. Still, this is good if you can find it super cheap. Oh, and a port of Burnout Revenge is on the Xbox 360 as well. It's a slightly upgraded port of the original Xbox game, but it's worth having if you don't own the original. The graphics are a bit cleaner, the sound quality is still amazing, and the gameplay is still incredibly fun. Unfortunately, the load times are a bit longer in this version. Anyway, I just wanted to mention this one here. Burnout Paradise is also on the console. Usually when you think RPGs, you think about games from previous generations, not really this one. Well, Microsoft paid a lot of money to get some RPGs developed, like this next one. This is Lost Odyssey from Mistwalker and Microsoft, and it was first released in Japan in late 2007 and in early 2008 everywhere else. This is an RPG, specifically a JRPG, just in case you need that part clarified. This game, which spans 4 discs, starts with no story or dialogue at all, just a scene of a battle and then suddenly you're given control. I like that. This is a turn-based RPG where you choose which enemy to attack or which part of a bigger enemy to attack. Soon, you'll start getting rings which can enhance your abilities during battle. At first, I was a little confused at how these work, but I quickly figured it out. Basically, you hold the R trigger as the outer ring closes in. You then release it when they match. The better you do, the more effective the ring you're wearing will be, such as strengthening that particular attack. This is okay, I guess, but I don't feel that it really adds much to the gameplay. It doesn't hurt it either, it's just kind of there. The battles are random and can happen at almost any time when you're not in a city. Anyway, you're Kime, who is an immortal. You're soon paired up with another immortal and the stereotypical JRPG annoying guy to go investigate the Grand Staff. Your world is powered by magic and there are shenanigans going on. Yes, you and your partner are both immortal, but somehow you can still die and you both need to be healed and stuff, but we'll just ignore that little technicality. You don't gain skills when you level up, but any mortals in your party will. The battles are pretty fun and they don't become annoying. Well, actually, the most annoying thing about the battles is how long they take to load. There are plenty of town sequences with lots of dialogues and typical shops and stuff. Sometimes you're not quite sure where to go, but often if you stop back at the inn where you're staying, they'll tell you. The graphics are pretty good for the most part, though the frame rate can dip quite a bit sometimes. This usually happens when it goes split screen to show multiple angles at once. I am disappointed that the sound is only in stereo, but it's almost like it's in Q sound or something. With only 2 speakers active, I could still hear some surround style effects, which is pretty cool. The music is also quite good when it plays, and it was composed by Nobuo Uematsu. This is a good RPG that can be kind of slow at times. You'll spend at least 50 hours with this one, which is a bit long for me, but maybe it's just right for you. The good news is that while it can be a bit slow sometimes, it's not annoyingly slow. Check it out. The Xbox 360 has a lot of shooters, especially if you're into imports. I only have a few, like Otomedius Excellent here from Konami. This one's heavily inspired by Gradius, only cutesy-fied, but not really in a good way like the Paradius series. I kinda bought into the hype before it came out, and I bought it, and I don't really know what I was expecting, but I just can't get into it. The graphics are super basic and cheap. In fact, they make me a bit depressed in their overall basicness, if that's a word. The sound is strictly in stereo and the music is entirely unremarkable. Your character is quite large and easy to hit, and it really does bring the gameplay down. Bottom line, I don't know why I have this game. Maybe if I were obsessed with Japanese culture, I'd enjoy it more. Raiden IV from Moss is a much better shooter. This is a vertical shooter that takes place in the middle of your 16:9 screen. This game is quite fun. It plays like any of the main Raiden games. Collect shot and missile power-ups which cycle before you collect them so you can upgrade however you want from the 3 different weapons. You also have a bomb blast at your disposal. The visuals here are good for what they are, and I feel much better about them than the visuals in Otomedius Excellent. The sound is once again stereo only, but the good news is that this game has excellent music. This one is really fun. I highly recommend it. This next one is called Omega 5 and it's on Xbox Live Arcade from Natsume and Hudson Soft. This one controls like a twin-stick shooter, and its style kind of reminds me of Forgotten Worlds, or maybe SCAT on the NES. Definitely more Forgotten Worlds, though. This one takes a while to get used to, but once you do, it can be pretty fun. There's 3 different weapons you can collect and power up. In addition to your main weapon, you also have a grapple chain thingy which can affix itself to enemies to continually damage them for a bit. You also have a few screen-clearing bombs. In addition, you can press the bumpers for what the game calls a dimensional move in order to avoid enemy attacks, but I always forget to use it. There's just so much to pay attention to with this game. The graphics start out maybe a tad plain, but they get better. Actually, I'm amazed how good everything looks and sounds, being that the entire game only takes up a bit over 40 megabytes. That's right, it can easily fit on a memory card. The music is great, and it helps convince you that it's worth trying just one more time. Also, I like that the main girl character's name is Booby.
DOLBY.
This one's tough, and it has to be as it doesn't have very many stages, but it's definitely worth trying. This game is compatible with future Xboxes, so there's really no reason not to play it. The last shooter that I personally have is Raiden Fighter's Aces. This is basically Raiden crossed over with the styles of some other more popular vertical shooters of its time. You have little symbols to collect and your ship can even get options. There's a lot of shimmering in the scrolling because the graphics aren't scaled properly, but at least the game gives you a ton of visual options so you can get close to the look that you'd prefer. The music is a mixed bag, but that's about as polite as I can be. Still, it's a fun game that will kick your ass. And trust me, you'll keep coming back for more. Again, there are a ton more shooters available for the console if you go the import route. Here's Halo Reach. I mentioned this one as it's the only Halo game I have on the system because it came with my Xbox 360S console. But Halo 3 is also available if you like Halo, which a lot of people do. Halo 4 is also there, and Halo Wars and Halo Spartan Assault and stuff like that. As you can probably tell, I'm not hugely into the series, but it seems kind of wrong not to mention Halo in this episode. Anyway, you're not on the Halo ring in this one, but on Planet Reach. Exciting stuff. You don't control Master Chief either, but instead some loser who controls and plays exactly like the Chief.
It's payback time.
I didn't play very much of this one because, well, it's Halo. But the graphics really aren't that bad, and the same can be said for the controls. Even the sound is pretty good at times. If you like Halo, play this one, unless you hate it for some reason. If you do, I recommend not playing it.
That's why they pay us the big bucks. Keep pouring it on, Spartan!
This is Fable III from Lionhead Studios. This one was also packed in with my Xbox 360S console. This is an RPG, a Western RPG. You play as a prince who's trying to gain followers so he can overthrow his evil brother who's currently the king. The game is full of choices to make, and they have an effect on how people treat you and how the game proceeds. There are no wrong answers, and it does add replayability if you'd fancy going through an RPG again a completely different way. The battles are handled like an action RPG, with you directly controlling them. You can use your melee weapon to slice and dice enemies, or you can use your magic to fry them if you prefer. A little trail of light leads your path to where you need to go next at all times, so it's quite literally impossible to get lost. You can adjust the brightness level of it, and you could probably even turn it off. I don't know, I haven't really messed with it. You can wander off of the trail, of course, and do your own thing. When I first played this, I had fun getting all the women to fall in love with my character. It's super easy to do if you just be nice to them. Even the married ones like you, and you can propose to them. Be careful though, because you can catch STDs in this game. You can also have multiple wives, it's all really up to you. The graphics are generally good, but sometimes the textures pop in late. I like how you can hear the town chattering all around you.
You make better times. All adventurers.
I've read that people generally don't like this one as much as the previous two games. I can't speak to that because I haven't played them, but I found this one decently enjoyable, if a little bit casual. Check it out if it looks interesting.
Help! What's that? Help! Hooray! Whew. I knew you weren't really going to hurt me.
Of course, there were fighting games available as well. Not that you think there would be with the quality of that controller and all. There are a lot of fighting games on the system, but one of my favorites is Ultra Street Fighter IV from Capcom. This is the final form of Street Fighter IV after all of its upgrades, add-ons, and whatnot. People tended to prefer the Xbox 360 version over the PlayStation 3, mainly because the online community was more robust and it worked better, being a premium service and all. That's all fine and good, but I'm super happy with single player and local multiplayer. This game uses 3D graphics, but the gameplay is purely in 2D. There are tons of characters to choose from, and each of them have their own story in the single player mode. I like that. Of course, you probably don't want to use the regular Xbox 360 controller, but instead a joystick or something with a 6-button layout with micro switches, like I'm using here. Haha, yeah. Even after all these years, I still enjoy the hell out of this one. Maybe one of these days I'll get around to purchasing Street Fighter V. Dead or Alive 4 from Tecmo is another good one-on-one fighting game. This came out only a month after the console launched, and it's exclusive to the platform. Creator Tomonobu Itagaki is a huge Xbox fanboy, so that comes as no surprise. This is a 3D fighter, and it's not wildly different from Dead or Alive 3 on the original Xbox other than the stages, some updated moves, and the other things that are different. That said, it's still fun, and you can kind of turn your brain off as you play it. On the default settings, you only have to win one round per match. This one is a bit tougher than the previous games in the series, but not much. Once again, I recommend using another controller other than the stock Xbox 360 pad, as the incredibly stiff buttons and D-pad on that thing are not meant for super fast fighting games. Each character has their own story in the single player mode, and as always it's mostly nonsensical, but I wouldn't have it any other way. The graphics are incredible, and it might be one of the highest resolution games on the platform. I can't be 100% sure, but it looks like it's running close to 1080p. The sound and music are also typical of the series, but no Aerosmith song this time out. Give this a go if you have a good fighting game controller for the system.
Ready? Fight!
Here's Crackdown from Real Time Worlds and Microsoft. This is an open world game that's heavily inspired by the likes of Grand Theft Auto. 3 big gangs each have control over a certain part of the city, and you need to take out the thugs, generals, and eventually the leaders of each gang. I find that it's all very chaotic and less focused than Grand Theft Auto, though you can still kill civilians, steal vehicles, and of course run over civilians. Yeah, I like that. It takes a lot for the cops to come after you, mainly because you're already a cop, but there are other penalties such as slowing the progression of your abilities. Speaking of which, you can eventually jump super high, which I remember being awesomely fun, but sadly I wasn't able to get that ability while capturing footage for this episode. The unsubscribe button is directly below. The aiming of your gun is a bit twitchy, and there's no way to adjust the sensitivity. You just need to get used to it. And you do. You can just wander around and do the missions when you feel like it, just like GTA. This, of course, is half the fun. The graphics go for kind of a cel-shaded look, and they're not bad. They're certainly better than the graphics in Crackdown on the 16-bit Genesis system from Sega. The music features licensed tracks, but to me they're mostly forgettable. These days, this game gives me a touch of motion sickness after an hour or so for some reason. Not sure what this game in particular is doing to cause that. A lot of people like this one though, and you can't find it on the PlayStation family of consoles. There were 2 sequels produced as well, but this is generally considered to be the best one. Alan Wake was originally released in 2010 from Remedy Entertainment and published by Microsoft. This was announced before the Xbox 360 launched, but didn't come out until many years later. It was worth the wait in my opinion, as it was a really fun third-person survival horror game. You play as Alan Wake, a writer who's struggling with writer's block. He and his wife are on vacation and weird things are happening. At first, Alan thinks he might be dreaming. Basically, the enemy are called the Taken and they're surrounded by shadows. In order to defeat them, you need to shine your flashlight on them and burn the darkness away. After that, you can shoot them dead. Of course, you need to not only keep finding ammo for your guns, but also batteries for your flashlight. You are dead if you can't shine it on your enemies. The game also has sequences that take place during the day, which don't involve being actively stalked by the Taken. The game is presented in an episodic fashion like a TV show, and it's narrated by Alan himself as he goes about his adventure.
The gas station was closer now, its light welcoming in the darkness.
The visuals are very well done and usually keep a good frame rate. The world is often dark, unsurprisingly, but there are gleaming lights and splashes of color here and there. The sound design is just as amazing, especially when big bad events happen.
This is bad.
The presentation really helps the already good gameplay. I definitely recommend you check this one out. It was remastered recently for the Xbox One, and Alan Wake 2 will be out soon as well.
I can keep this up forever!
The Xbox 360 was the first console Forza Horizon showed up on, and it arrived in 2012. This is an open-world racing game that takes place at a music festival for some reason. There are plenty of events to compete in so that you can unlock more events and ultimately be the most popular person at the festival. If you've played any of the other games in the series, the DNA is all here in this first title. For example, you've got the all-seeing radio buddies talking to you, and they know exactly what you do whenever you do it immediately.
That's what I was talking about. Show me your skills.
How? One thing that's different about this game compared to, say, Forza Horizon 3, 4, and 5 is that you can't drive off-road anywhere near as much. Most of the roads are bordered, so you can't just cruise through the landscape willy-nilly. This definitely makes the game less fun and more restrictive, but the power of the DVD medium has its limitations. Still, there are a few small areas here and there that you can roam around on. The graphics here are pretty good for their time, but they don't quite look as good as Forza Horizon 5 on the Xbox Series X if you look super closely. No, closer than that. The sound would also be improved in later games with better use of the surrounds and the subwoofer. Still, not a bad start to the series. Dead Rising from Capcom was the first game I really got into on the console. In fact, I think this game is the one that finally convinced me to get an Xbox 360. Like Forza Horizon, which I just talked about, this game also takes place in Colorado. And hey, I'm from Colorado, so that makes it extra neat. You're Frank West, a journalist armed with a camera and unlimited film. The town has been taken over by zombies, and a helicopter drops you off at the shopping mall. You have 72 hours to find out what's going on before the helicopter comes back and picks you up. During your time here, you can take pictures to earn experience points. You'll also have to deal with lots and lots of zombies in what is probably one of the largest shopping malls in the entire world, certainly in Colorado. You can kill zombies in many creative ways, using only what's lying around. Trust me, this is half of the fun right here, and trust me, you can trust a guy that says trust me. It won't be long until you've killed more than half of the town's population. Even if you die, you can save your experience and upgrades, but you have to start the 72 hours from the beginning each time. Even so, it's incredibly fun. Once you do everything right in the 72-hour mode, you go to the overtime mode, which tacks on another 24 hours. Beat this and you get the game's true ending. This game caused a little bit of controversy when it came out because all this text right here was too small to read clearly on a standard definition television. I still kind of find that hilarious. This is a good one to come back to now and again. I like how you can hear the zombies all around you in surround sound. There are even boss fights because of course there are. You don't have to do them, you can kind of just do anything you want, but again, you can go through the game as many times as you want in order to do it all. There are HD versions of this one on other platforms now if you're interested. Alright, I've got 5 more games to show you in this episode, and first up, another RPG? Actually, yes. This is Infinite Undiscovery from Square Enix and Tri-Ace. Tri-Ace is known mostly for their work on the Star Ocean series. This 2-disc game is an action RPG with a lot of unrealized potential. You start out escaping from a prison. You fight your own battles action style, except that Tri-Ace has made things needlessly complex. For example, to use the abilities of someone else in your party, you need to stand near them, tap the right bumper, press the button which corresponds to the party member you desire, then press the button of the action you'd like them to perform, and then perform it. It's annoying at best and frustrating at worst, especially in the heat of battle. Like here, I needed to blow up these barrels to defeat the giant ogre while getting attacked by him and his minions. I kept having to run back and forth to stay alive, which meant my partner was rarely ever close. Not only this, but it takes time to set up these actions and aim the arrow. I was yelling the entire time at the controls to please just obey me. I thought I was gonna die, but somehow I was able to do it. Then I get the key to the prison exit, only I seem to be unable to use it on the door at all. Like, seriously, there's nothing I can do. It turns out that you have to manually put your sword away before you can do anything. So dumb. If you've ever played a game in the East series, starting with number 7 or later, you'll quickly realize how clunky this game's control mechanics are in comparison. There are also some stealth aspects to the game which reward you for sneaking up on enemies, but I'm usually just too impatient for such things.
Just as we planned.
The visuals on the whole are extremely well done, with lots of detail in the character models. The music is by the prolific Motoi Sakuraba, and it's his usual stuff, which is adequate.
Get down!
Overall, I feel that this game tries to be more complex than it needs to be, and as a result, it's not very fluid. But like I said though, it has lots of promise. In fact, you might get some enjoyment out of it if you can look past its rough edges.
Yeah! Yeah! Hey! Ah! Yeah! Hey! Yeah!
Bullet Witch is a 2007 game from Kavia and Atari, though it was released in Japan in 2006. This is a third-person shooter where you play as a witch in the future year of 2013, which of course is post-apocalyptic. This one gets a bad rep, but honestly, it's not as horrible as you may think. It gives a really bad first impression with terribly choppy and rather ugly visuals. But if you can just stick with it for a bit, you might find yourself enjoying yourself. You have a giant gun with unlimited ammo, though it will need to be slowly reloaded once your clips run out. You also have magic which you can cycle through with the left and right bumpers. These can do things like push objects away, put up a barricade wall, heal people, or even bring down lightning to destroy tanks and other things. You have a life meter and a magic meter, and both will slowly recharge as long as you're not using magic or getting attacked. There are often barricades that you'll have to bring down by shooting these floating brain guys. The environments are huge, and probably the worst thing about this game is that there's no map or nothing to tell you where you should go. You don't exactly move fast, so going from place to place in this giant world can sometimes be excruciatingly slow. You get there only to find that's not where you need to go, so guess who gets to run all the way back and look for a different way? Seriously, a map with points of interest on it would greatly improve this game. At least you can upgrade weapons and abilities in the shop between stages. Also, the sound isn't half bad.
It looks like the shield is down. Let's keep moving.
The graphics are often dark, which can make enemies rather tough to see sometimes until they start shooting at you. Still, if you can get past the slow parts, I think this can be enjoyable. Ace Combat 6 from Namco is exclusive to the Xbox 360. This takes place in a fictional world with fictional countries and military forces, but with real-world jets from the United States of A. There's a story with, characters and stuff, but it's pretty badly acted, and you'll be reaching for that start button to skip these sequences as fast as you can.
Listen to your teacher, okay? And, give the king my best.
Dance with an angel, Mom.
Then you get into the action, and you've got to follow the on-screen indicators pointing you to a nearby enemy, get within range, and then fire a missile or maybe even gun them down. Wash, rinse, and repeat for about 30,000 more times for any given stage. Seriously, could we please have a few thousand less enemies to kill in each area? Sometimes you need to kill specific types of enemies. Most of them exist as tiny little specks on your screen, so you'll need to eyeball your map to find your primary targets. The targets that you need to worry about are always in red, which definitely helps. I like the missions where you slowly fly along the ground with your afterburners blasting, taking out ground targets. Yeah, it's crazy unrealistic, but it's fun that way. The graphics impressed the hell out of me back when this was new because they cobbled together the various areas with real satellite imagery. I tell you, it was something to behold back then for sure. Everything looks so much more real than previous video games. However, this one only runs at 30 frames per second, unlike the other games in the franchise. This is a good game that can be pretty fun if you can get past the slightly overlong missions. It was made compatible with Xboxes from the future if you're interested.
Enemy kill confirmed.
This is Ninja Gaiden II from Tecmo. The gameplay is similar to the first 3D adventure on the original Xbox, and it's full of hack-and-slash action. There have been improvements though, like being able to cycle through your items with a D-pad instead of having to pause the game and go through everything. The action feels confusing and a bit discombobulating at first, but you quickly get used to it. The main reason for that is that the camera can feel like it goes all over the place, and you can even lose track of which ninja you are in the battle. It doesn't really matter though, just keep holding block and pressing attack, preferably your strong attack. There's a lot of super fast action here, and despite what you may have heard about the difficulty, I still encourage everyone to give it an honest effort. It does sometimes feel like you're in a conversation where everyone else is talking and you're just trying to get a word in edgewise, but nobody will shut up long enough, only with the attacks instead of talking. That's an analogy, by the way, in case you're new to the concept. But dodging out of the way is so fun, and so is using your special attacks. There are shops where you can buy stuff to revive your life and magic abilities, and plenty of save and life restoration checkpoints throughout the immensely large levels. The graphics here are outstanding with finely detailed environments and characters, all running at a mostly rock-solid 60 frames per second. There are always a ton of enemies on screen to deal with as well. This game did come out on the PlayStation 3 as Ninja Gaiden Sigma 2, but it has fewer enemies who are stronger and you can't chop off their limbs as much. I prefer this version, and it seems most other people do as well. Ninja Gaiden 3 is also on the Xbox 360, but I never really got into that one. Finally, we have Ninja Blade by From Software. This one came out in 2009. First off, let me start out by saying that while this is nowhere near as elegant as Ninja Gaiden 2, it can still be fun and it definitely has its own charm. This takes place in the future, all the way in 2015 if you can even imagine that far ahead. Basically, there is a parasitic infection attacking the populace, and of course as a ninja, only you can save the world. You have some standard attacks and moves you can do, many of which are similar to Ninja Gaiden, like the wall running for example. Unfortunately, it's just not handled as well here, but it's still workable. You can get different swords and ninja magic. One of the swords reminds me of the one I used a lot in Demon Souls, another game by From Software. As you defeat enemies, you collect stuff and you can use it as your currency later to upgrade your equipment. You're definitely going to want to do this at your earliest opportunity. You also have a Ninja Vision button that can show you where weak points and hidden things are. I found using this a bit annoying, honestly, and I didn't feel that it added to the gameplay. My other main beef with the gameplay, well, it's actually more of a quibble, but some of the boss fights go on for far too long and take up a huge portion of the levels. Once you defeat them, you're happy to be done with it, and you don't feel like fighting them ever again, which may bring down replayability. Oh, and this game has QuickTime events, and it has them often. This might be a deal breaker for some people, but honestly they're not that bad. You seem to be able to retry the event as many times as you need to with no penalty, except maybe your overall score at the end of the stage. And you can't just memorize them, as they will often change some of the buttons if you retry. But you can do it. I believe in you. The graphics are very well done, but the movement of them is not, with lots and lots of screen tearing everywhere, which can make it look pretty sloppy sometimes. The sound is quite good, with great use of the surrounds, though I would have preferred more subwoofer in the mix during the actual gameplay. Oh, and the dialogue is super quiet, so I recommend turning it up all the way in the options. Overall, this certainly isn't a bad game, just as long as you can stomach the QuickTime events. There you go, that was only a handful of noteworthy games for the Xbox 360. I may make another one down the road when I get my hands on some more games. And what are some of your favorites? Let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack in surround sound! I had just woken up. Was I asleep? I seem to remember that I had been playing the highly rated video game called Alan Wake on the celebrated Xbox 360 video game console from the world-renowned company called Microsoft. I heard a noise. This was the second time I had heard it. The first was right as I woke up. I didn't know if I was dreaming or not. I had no choice. I needed to investigate. I felt like it was calling me. Yes, even though it wasn't in English, which is the popular language I'm somewhat proficient in, I could sense that it wanted something from me. But what? I could hear it coming, like the unavoidable claws of death that eventually gets us all. It was near, and suddenly there it was. It was my kitty cat. She wanted treats, and she wanted them now. Once again, I was forced to bow to her dastardly will.